Okay, it's 11:05, so if you will all take your seats, we're going to stay on time. For those of you that you don't know, I spent 21 years in the military, so I know how to keep time. And I also know that the key to a good conference is staying on time and on schedule. For those of you who tried to take the survey and for whatever reason it didn't work on your phone, at your seat there is a written survey, and if you will complete that and leave it on the table, we will collect that at the end of the day, compile that, and add that into the survey results that'll be posted on the website. So just so you know. I'm thrilled to bring our next speaker to the stage. Her name is Nicole Smith, and she is the chief economist at Georgetown University. I said to her this morning, I'll bet she didn't know when she started giving Iowa this talent pipeline data that she's been collecting for a while, that this is what it would lead to. But we are thrilled to have her here with us today to give us some more information about good jobs that pay without a BA. Thank you.
So good morning, Iowa. It's such a pleasure to be here again. Thank you very much for inviting me to this presentation. When I walked into the room and I saw so many faces, I thought, wow, this is amazing. Because, a few years ago at Georgetown, we did this presentation on jobs that pay and tried to figure out which are the occupations and in which industries are the ones that are growing. And I had absolutely no idea that it would take us to this. So I want to extend, congratulations to the governor on getting this all done and started, and to everyone else who's participated and, into getting Iowa future ready. So my presentation today is called Good Jobs That Pay Without a BA. And I know that rhymes, and for those of you who are a little bit cynical, I don't want you to be turned off by that. But what we had intentions of doing at Georgetown was to sort of step away for a moment from this notion that the only thing that matters is a BA. And I know that's hard to digest coming from Georgetown because, we're an institution that focuses so much on the BA and above. But we wanted to give attention to the large segment of society and the large segments of occupations that are still quote unquote good, that still pay well, and that still offer opportunity for economic mobility and advancement. So this project we actually started about 2 years ago, and with a little bit of partial funding from J.P. Chase Morgan, as well as the Gates Foundation and all of the benefactors that help us with this. But we wanted to answer the question, if we looked at all of the jobs in the United States, how many of them are good? And of course, that's really an important question to ask because, as the presenter earlier from Gallup was stating, a lot of people feel that, they take a long time between graduation and actually getting a good job. And if we were to ask people to give a subjective definition of what good means, we'll have all sorts of different definitions. For some, good means money, how much I'm going to make. And usually there are dimensions to that, gender dimensions to when good means money. We have a few surveys that when you ask men what's a good job, they're like, oh, a good job is a good job that pays. I need a good job that pays me a certain amount that I can take care of my family and that sort of thing. And when you ask a woman what's a good job, on average, there's always exceptions to the rule that women tend to talk about the community at work and actually, having a job that suits their interests, and it's having a job that, they feel that they're making a significant contribution. So we sort of took all of that into consideration, and we settled on money as our definition of a good job because we are economists after all. And our definition, well, if in defining a good job, we chose about $35,000, which is $17 per hour, for a full-time job as the minimum earnings. And if you're 45, it should be a little bit more. So we said around 45,000, which is $22 per hour for workers who are 45 and older. And once we settled on that, barely financial definition of a good job, we found that in 2015, on average, we had about 6 million jobs, good jobs, that paid between 35 and 45, about 8 million between 45 and 55, and about 16 million 55 and above. And this is just those good jobs that don't require a BA. So what I mean by those good jobs, those are the good jobs we were talking about earlier, those middle skills. And I've been chided a lot for using the phrase middle skills, so I'm a little bit apprehensive about saying middle skills. But how about those jobs that don't require BA? We could be talking about a test-based certification or an industry-based certification. We could be talking about a post-secondary vocational certificate. We could be talking about an associate's degree. And Iowa really taught us a lot about paying close attention to the definition of the type of associate's degrees, whether it's an associate of arts, an associate of science, and exactly what those credentials mean in terms of seat time and in terms of the major selected. But in terms of these good jobs, we found that the narrative that all of these good jobs have gone away is just not quite complete, in the sense that there are many of these good jobs that still exist. The nature of the jobs are changing in terms of the education that's required, and the industry that these good jobs are found in has also changed, and we wanted to highlight this in this report. So who gets a good job by sex and race and ethnicity? Well, a lot of these good jobs are still held by men, and I don't want to see too many frowning faces by the women. We know a gender wage gap exists, and there are lots of reasons why. If I were to ask a survey, because we were doing surveys earlier, of everyone in the audience, what would you estimate the gender wage gap to be today? What do you think the gender wage gap is right now? How much do women earn compared to men? How much on the dollar? I heard 83. Anyone else wants to challenge that 83? 60? 76? Okay, so you're revealing your age when you tell me those numbers. Because it used to be 60 at one point. It moved to 76, 77. And right now, the closest definition is about 81 cents on the dollar. And the challenge with defining the gender wage gap in this way is that it does not take into account education or occupational choice or industry choice. It just simply takes the average of men's earnings, the average of women's earnings, and takes a ratio of that. And so it's not a very accurate measure of where the gender wage gap really stands. But if we were to try to compare apples to apples, and then try to compare by occupation and education and major choice, then the real number for the gender wage gap is closer to 92 cents on the dollar. So that's good and that's bad. Because 92 cents on the dollar means, okay, if we were to go to school and get your education, you get your degree, you do everything you're supposed to do, you can earn 92 cents compared to a man. But for some of the cynics out there, especially like me, I think, well, why 92 cents and not 100 cents on the dollar? So there's still 8 cents of that unexplained. But the reason I wanted to highlight that is that occupational choice matters when it comes to what type of wages you earn. And it does matter, and we still have significant amounts of occupational segregation in jobs today that we need to really, remove some of that, the social stigma associated with that. So who gets the job, the good job? By sex, race, ethnicity. We have, a bias towards men. We have declining amounts of good jobs for white Americans, increasing amounts for Hispanic, Latino. And this is in some ways reflective of demographics. So it's really reflective of the population changes that's happening in society. But I wanted to highlight a couple things from what we said earlier. And every time I speak after other people is always a challenge because I tend to sort of bounce off of their ideas. So when the governor was on stage earlier, she presented a video. And there was a young woman on the video that said, well, I care about pursuing a job that conforms with my interests because money isn't everything. And that's 100% true. But as an economist and someone who pays attention to data and outcomes and polls, such as the gentleman from Gallup, I found that notion of money doesn't always matter, tends to come a lot more from women than it does from men. And I really want us to recognize that there are differences in the decisions that people make, which might be influenced by social circumstances, but there are gender components to it. And the reason I wanted to raise that point is that, speaking to the gentleman who spoke about the size of the student loan debt, which is approaching $1.4 trillion, and he said that, about $1 trillion of that occurred from 2003 till present. Well, 2/3 of that debt is held by women. So we have a disproportionate part of student loan debt being held by women who are required to repay this debt with lower earnings brought about by the gender wage gap. And so what we have is, a perfect storm here of increasing difficulty in repayment and increasing, how the level of burden felt in the society by the decisions we make, the types of jobs we do, and then paying back these student loans, that is disproportionately felt by women. So this is an uncomfortable conversation to have, but we must have it. And I'm a mother myself, but my kids are much younger. But I have a lot of nieces and nephews who are teens and in their early 20s. And whenever I speak to them about that, they roll their eyes and they say to me, Auntie, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to do what I love. And stop telling me about what these things will pay. And then 2-3 years later, I get calls for loans for various things that they want. So the point I'm trying to make here is we need to pay attention to the decisions that you make about the jobs you select. And I was very much excited by the panel that was on here earlier that made the connection between where the jobs are, where the opportunities are, and connecting those to internship and externships for students. So we need to do much more of that. We need better connection between community colleges, between our 4 institutions, and industry in deciding which of these particular occupations are the ones we will pursue, in the sense, which particular types of programs we will pursue that, in fact, is reflective of jobs of the future. So once we look at the good jobs again, we know that there is an education component to these good jobs. And this education component of the good jobs tells you a little bit that between 91 and 2015, the share of good jobs going to workers without a BA has been falling. So this should not be news to any of us, that there is a little bit of movement towards more education, the skills bias, technological change. But despite this movement, we still know that workers without a BA can still get good jobs. So this is just giving you, a relative size of workers in the economy, those without a BA, and those without a BA who would actually get a good job. So your next question, I think, should be, well, where? Where can we find these good jobs, and which industries? And to some extent, we have, in fact, experienced losses in some industries, like blue-collar losses, blue-collar change, especially in manufacturing, transportation, and utilities. So we have some losses. But I always ask that we temper this notion of losses of jobs in manufacturing with the idea of when they come back, what do they look like? And a lot of the jobs in manufacturing that return are in advanced manufacturing that require more education, that require test-based licensing, that required your industry-based certifications in order for you to get those jobs. So the statistic I love to use is that about 40 years ago, each worker in manufacturing contributed about $100,000 to output. So if you can think of output per person, it's about $100,000 per person. And that's when manufacturing was close to about 30% of all jobs in the economy. Okay? Today, each person in manufacturing contributes about $300,000 to output. Okay? And that $300,000 tells you that a person today in manufacturing is almost 3 times as productive in terms of what they can contribute to output. And the reason for that is technology has been incorporated in the way manufacturing works, and we need more and more education to do that. So I wanted to conclude with looking at Iowa specifically. And in Iowa, 2 out of 5 jobs are good jobs for workers without a BA. So Iowa is at the top of the distribution. So I have here, all of the states lined up, and Iowa is pretty much the top third of the distribution of where the good jobs are for people without a BA, and that's really positive for the state. And if you have some time to look at this later, I have an infographic that tells us specifically for Iowa where the good jobs are by earnings. It's pretty competitive compared to the states around, which tells me that Iowa is a pull state for opportunity, a pull state for jobs. The change in the non-BA good jobs is going to skills services. So there's a lot of opportunity for those skills service jobs that are outside of manufacturing as well. So I thank you for your time listening to me, and I can open the opportunity for questions for those who want to ask questions.
And we'll use the same technique that we used with Brandon. If you have a question to ask, please send it to that website that you've hopefully logged into earlier. I have a couple of questions, Nicole, to get us started. The report that Good Jobs That Pay Without a BA opens with the line, "The reported death of the middle economy is greatly exaggerated." What factors cause this fundamental misunderstanding, and how can we correct it?
Well, the notion that the middle economy is dead is really driven by this idea that manufacturing is dead. We know that the existing narrative out there is that most jobs, manufacturing jobs, have been offshored, and the jobs have gone to China and they're not coming back. So one of the ways to combat this narrative is really through much more positive attention to it. A recognition that, an understanding that those middle jobs still exist, a positive PR campaign so that, young men and young women understand that you don't necessarily have to wear a hard hat and get your hands dirty if you're going to be working at these types of technical middle-skill jobs, and an understanding that these jobs can pay a living wage that can take care of your family. So it's really about a positive PR and let people know that, these jobs still exist and they pay well.
You had on your presentation the number of jobs in Iowa that exist without good jobs without a BA, and we were at 46%. How do we include this fact, or how should this impact our policymakers' strategy when we look forward to the future of education in Iowa?
Well, I think it's really important for us to connect the pipeline and to ensure that we have a continuous flow and supply of workers that are interested in these jobs, that recognize these jobs exist and see these jobs as opportunity for them to take care of their family. We spoke today about the pipeline from college to jobs, but I even encourage us to go further back and look at the pipeline from high school and middle school, exposure to these types of jobs, to recognize that these jobs exist, to have mentors early on that can speak to how successful they have become from having pursued these jobs and where the opportunities lie in the future, and also building on internship experiences in high school and beyond, in college, so that the working students who are working while enrolled can work at jobs that are very much related to what they do when they graduate and not necessarily just parallel jobs in retail just trying to get by.
Do you have any books, programs, or initiatives you would recommend in working with populations to empower them towards beneficial work?
And maybe I can have a unapologetic plug for some of the research we've done at Georgetown. But we have a couple of reports, and the one I'm specifically thinking on is on working learners. And this report looks at working learners and low-income working learners, where we specifically address those young Americans who are enrolled full-time and might be working full-time or part-time, some of the specific challenges they themselves have encountered, and how they're overcoming these challenges and moving into success. We have amazing anecdotes and personal stories of people who have achieved success across the nation, across the country. Those who are doing so having achieved middle skills, as well as those who've gone on to pursue the BA, those who've done the certificates and certifications while enrolled and are working on internships while enrolled. So I think, if we were to look at some of those anecdotes and narratives, then that's also positive.
The good jobs that you identified, are they resilient to shifts as a result of automation or information technology advances?
Well, that's a loaded question. That's a heavy question. I mean, so what jobs are impervious to automation? I don't even know if any exist. I'm thinking even my job might be at risk. But so the question is, to what extent is automation replacing jobs? And automation has replaced, will continue to replace jobs. Usually those jobs that are repetitive in nature, that are easily automated, that you can, if you can automate that task, you can certainly teach a robot how to do that task. And what remains are the high-level analytical and critical thinking tasks that often require, an individual to make decisions that are high-level decisions. But there's also a question where we've been exploring the extent to which not only should we be considering which jobs are removed as a result of automation, but which tasks within jobs. So even if the job remains, what are the tasks that remain, and how are those tasks elevated? So there's a school of thought that says that, some of these tasks will be automated, but the individual that remains must, in fact, better connect to technology to be successful at those jobs.
A quick question. Has Georgetown looked at how many non-BA jobs are actually filled by people with a BA?
Yes, we have. And what we call that overlap. We talk a lot about overlap. So the nature of jobs and the way these things operate, there are some non-BA jobs that are filled with people with BAs, and there are some BA jobs that are filled with people without BAs, depending on what level of experience they have and how much they've done. But here's a concern. If the subtext of that question is, are we overqualified in the sense that we have more BAs filling jobs that non-BAs ought to have filled, then my response to that would be, I am not concerned so much with the number of BAs, so much as matching the majors and the degrees that the BAs have pursued. So the overqualification we observe is actually a number of BAs that might be pursuing degrees for which we have dying occupations, or occupations that are not necessarily growing at the same rate as the rate in which people are pursuing that. So the concern is, to what extent are we doing a better job of matching the types of degrees that people are pursuing today with the jobs of the future?
Nicole, we've generated a ton of questions, and for those of you who we didn't get to ask your questions, Nicole will be around during the next portion of the program and the networking lunch. So feel free to stop by up here and visit with her and ask her question, or ask your question to her directly. So let's give a welcome or a thank you to Nicole for her presentation.